finished on the inside already, like a cape. They may not want to tear the inside of their house apart, and if they're re-roofing,
now they have an phenomenal
option.
Disruption of your life, right? It's
absolutely.
It's your ceiling, it's your walls upstairs. It's, it's everywhere. It's the entire home. Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, a weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply of the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by GBA Senior Editor Kiley Jacques.
Hello.
Fine Homebuilding Editorial Director Brian Pontalillo.
Hey, everyone.
And our amazing producer Jeff Rose.
Hi there.
Please email your question to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. It's a pleasure to see you all this morning. Thanks for being here.
Nice to see you too.
So, Brian, you really scared me yesterday when you said that you were out doing some contracting work, some carpentry work, and it was the best time. And what did you say on the job site? I forget what you said, but
best
what did you say?
Best day of work in a long time.
Oh, my goodness. This is how it starts.
I saw your face crumble. One by one, they're leaving.
I had the opportunity, and sort of both are ongoing opportunities because the work is not done. A friend and former Fine Homebuilding editor, Chris Green, and is doing some work on his own house. He's adding a bathroom, and he's adding it by bumping out into a 2-story space. So the bathroom is will bump out into the top of the 2-story space.
What's below?
It's challenging to explain. It's a house that is built into a hillside, and so there's on the back side of the house there are a couple of bedrooms that have ceilings that rise from a normal maybe 8-foot plate height all the way up to a 2-story height where they meet the house up the hill, if that makes any sense. So basically, if you think of a cathedral ceiling, well, it's like a half cathedral ceiling in this bedroom, and where the upper part of the tall wall on the other side of the upper part of the tall wall is a living room, and that's what they want to add a bathroom to. So Chris is gonna bump into that bedroom space with the bathroom, and then do some built-ins and a bed below it. So there'll be a little bit of a low ceiling height there, but it'll really be only where you end up laying down.
Interesting. So
it's an interesting project, and I'm going to be helping him over the course of a few weekends, and we started last weekend mostly with demo and getting prepped. I'm just hoping that I'm there for not just the demo but the interesting parts. So I'm kind of he's probably trying to make as much progress as possible, and I'm hoping that he's done nothing by the time I get back on Saturday. So we'll see how that goes. And then Sunday I started. I had already started, but I'm refinishing my mother-in-law's deck for the second time. I did it about 6 years ago, so I started that project last weekend and 2 weekends ago, and made some more progress on it this past weekend, and we'll keep going with that.
So industrious.
How's that going? Is that drudgery? Is it hot and miserable?
I know a lot of people would not like this work. Especially that work, I actually enjoy it. There's something about it that I find my groove. The last time I did it was a bit more intense. Last time I did it, it had been about 20 years the deck was in place for, and it's a pressure treated deck, and to have it, I felt like at that point I thought these deck boards probably have 5-6 years left in them, and then they're going to need to be changed. But I thought the more thorough job I do, the more life we'll get out of them. And so I took the deck back to bare wood, sanded everything, washed everything. I did use some wood brightener on it, and then stained it, and it looked really nice. And now 6 or so years later, those deck boards, there's still a couple that are they're going to start to get questionable soon, but we actually were able to preserve them for quite a bit longer. This time I'm not going to such great lengths. My initial plan was just to give it a good washing, excuse me, and then recoat it. But I did end up doing some sanding, and I think even the light sanding that I'm doing makes a big difference. Even after it's amazing that even after, all these years of this wood being in service, there's still sap coming through, and still, so just to kind of, knock that down and soften edges and like the railings, for example, where people are going to put their hands. I mean, it just prevents splinters.
Yeah,
So just like it's as much about the finish as it is about the function and the livability of the deck. So I got the whole deck washed. I got about, I don't know, maybe half of the sanding done, and the areas that I sand. I ran out of sandpaper for my orbital sander, and it was like Sunday midday, so I decided I'll just start sanding the areas that I've sanded. So I got all that I've sanded stained.
Nice.
Brian, did you use that technique? Who's the article? Patrick, was it you that worked on an article with the guy who's developed a technique for refinishing decks? Who is that?
Jim Grant in Santa Barbara, California is that's his specialty.
What's unusual about what he does? Anything?
What's unusual to me about Jim Grant is he has an entire business where he just refinishes decks, which is kind of a cool business in Santa Barbara, right? Because people's outdoor living space is such a huge part of their lives. And as he pointed out to me one time, he's like, people in the Northeast and New England, for example, like, weathered wood. People in California don't like weathered wood. They like wood to look brand new. So he's got his work cut out for him.
Yeah.
If anyone's interested, we'll put that article that Jim Grant did for Fine Homebuilding on the podcast page that outlines his process, which isn't all that unusual, Kiley. I don't think he uses a pressure washer, but on low, power with a wide fanned nozzle, so it doesn't damage the wood, which is a thing you can really get in trouble with, the pressure washer cleaning decks.
I think what's unusual about his process and what I learned from his process for, the first time and I've done this to a few pressure treated decks, but what I learned from his process is just how thorough you really need to be to do it well.
Mm-hmm. You can't skip steps if you want long-term success.
Right.
Kiley, what have you been doing?
I'll keep it brief because we have such a long script to get through, but I was going to share kind of an interesting project that I've been learning about. It's the University of Kansas has an architecture program for grad students whereby they work with a man named Dan Rockhill, and he helms Studio 804. And every year, I can't fathom they are able to do this, but every year in a 9-month period, the students build a single-family residence. This year, however, they decided to help a local shelter, to build 10, and 10 more are coming, container homes for homeless population to live in. Originally, it was to keep them isolated and safe during the pandemic. But what we talked about the retrofitting of these containers, and it's just, they all have mini splits. They were retrofitted to be high performing container houses. And it's just such a sharp looking project. If anybody's interested, I'll share it. And the fact that it was all student built, it just blows my mind. And it's really a sharp looking facility. It's, a lot of thought went into how it was done. They all have solar panels, and of course it's all miniaturized. So that was really interesting to see how they mounted them. They're ADA accessible. I mean, they're able to sleep 4 people in each shipping container, and it looks like a very pleasant environment to be in. So I love projects like that,
That sounds cool.
Yeah. So I thought I'd share that. Let's share some images of it.
Jeff, you were sharing with us before the show the gory details of your automotive repair, but Brian hasn't heard much about it.
Well, I don't know that that's really an appropriate topic but I've been working on the car all last weekend, so just rebuilding the suspension, and it's just miserable work.
I share your pain. I've done that. I was spending hours on end on Sunday sawing dimensional lumber into fir balusters for my staircase. So I was taking mostly 2x4 scraps and some other larger pieces and sawing them into 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch balusters, and then planing them to 1 1/16 roughly. And in the process, I generated 2 large garbage bags full of wood chips, which was kind of exciting. And I'm trying to make something from nothing, Brian.
Do you have a use for those?
Yeah.
Do you have a use for those wood chips?
No, do you?
No. but I think you should find one.
Like, what should I do with them?
What about
Well, I don't
throwing them under a deck? Is that a good idea? Like
Absolutely not.
No, because that's going to be a moisture draw.
Well, it's organic material. I don't think you want that under your deck. It's going to attract, fungus and critters and ants and right.
What about like around your patio or something? Keep weeds down.
There's going to be 1,000 people who write into the podcast email box with suggestions of what I could do with my wood chips. He'll still have them, folks, so feel free.
Well, that's good, because I think there's probably a lot of people who listen to this show who have dust collection systems and would like ideas on what to do with the stuff that they collect in their shop.
So there's a architectural mill workshop near our offices, the Taunton campus, and I always see their wood chips out in these huge clear plastic bags. So I'm guessing they're wondering what to do with them also.
I'm surprised somebody like Matt's garden would lend itself to that. Throw the wood chips down between the rows. He's got a huge food garden. That seems like a good thing to do with them.
Yeah, I think as mulch it would be fine, right? But Carol has very, very specific requirements when it comes to mulch, so yeah, I stay out of it.
Yeah, it's more like for paths.
So we heard from someone, we were talking about how you prevent yourself from getting electrocuted in a swimming pool with a poorly wired light. Sorry for the delay. When it comes to shock in the pool and why the customer was not electrocuted, we have several non-expert theories. The NEC 680 covers swimming pool electrical code. Disclaimer, I'm not an electrician, I'm mostly an idiot, so here are my theories. NEC 680 requires an equipotential bonding grid with a solid copper wire conducting all metal, including handrails. If all metal surface in the pool have the same voltage potential, then there will not be amperage flow, and the swimmer is not likely to be a path for a current. 2, the switch was in a very odd place to the side and under the deck. 3, if the best path to ground is the back of the metal light niche, then the swimmer isn't likely to get the path to ground. When we do leak detection using an electronic detection tool, please see the leak track 2400 from Anderson Leak Detection. The light fixture is the largest source of interference. The back of the light niche is an amazing ground. Okay, Benjamin, so I had to look up all this stuff. Thank you for your thoughts here, and I don't think you're an idiot at all. I think he's onto the right thing here. Anyway, so the leak track is this device used to find leaks in vinyl swimming pool liners, and what it does is it creates a little electrical field that you then go around the pool with, and you can track down a leak. It's a pretty amazing piece of kit that costs several, like $2,000. So very special thing. But apparently the light is always got a good bonding ground, so that's why it doesn't shock people, even if it's completely malfunctioning. That was interesting, right? Mm-hmm. This comes from our friend Mike Guertin. Hi, Patrick. I usually listen to the podcast and appreciate that you make it a point to describe the photos that readers send in. I had to go to the podcast page to see the substandard deck guardrail post attachment after your description. It drives me nuts to see dangerous work. The poster, Matt, noted that the builder mounted the post this way in order to keep from puncturing the water collection system. It's obvious that the builder doesn't read or follow directions. This is clearly illustrated by the use of decking screws on the post base and angle brackets in the photos. Only properly sized nails or the hardware manufacturer's metal connector screws can be used in hardware. In the case of the Trex underdeck drainage system, Rain Escape, the Trex website has a series of videos that clearly explain how to install the drainage system, including 2 videos specifically demonstrating how to flash Rain Escape around a post that's structurally mounted to the deck framing. And the simplest solution doesn't even require any flashing. The post can be fastened to the outside face of the deck/balcony and avoid the drainage system altogether. On a parallel note, the IRC has not until now included any mention of how to secure a deck guard post, so many builders are left to their own to figure out an attachment system. The deck code portion of the 2021 IRC has a new section dedicated to deck guard post connections. It requires that guard loads be transferred to the deck framing with a continuous load path to the deck joists. Okay, so joist that a post is fastened to has to be connected to the adjacent post to prevent the joist from rotating. Think blocking between the joists. And the blocking can't rely on fasteners driven into end grain of wood that are subject to withdraw. While a little vague, at least it lets us know that the code is taking guard post attachment seriously, and hopefully inspectors start looking more closely. As you noted, the American Wood Council's DCA 6 guide has some details, as do hardware and structural screw manufacturers like Simpson Strong-Tie, Fasten Master, and Mytech. Wow, thanks, Mike. That was alarming. Did you see these post attachments, Brian? Were you on that episode?
No.
Kylie, you did, right?
I did. It came from GBA.
So this guy's deck posts were just completely scarily attached, and his solution was to tell the folks whose home he was building was to watch their kids when they were out on the deck.
You know, it's fascinating. You know, I had rebuilt a deck that had deck posts installed with drywall screws, and you know it's appalling, right? And at the same time, I tried really hard to tear those deck posts off, and I couldn't do it. So and on the one hand, it was. You know, like I said, on the one hand, I was sort of appalled by the assembly, and on the other hand, I was like, wow, this connection's pretty strong, But I think there are simple steps to get much better deck post connections than that, and I'm curious about that note that in Mike's comments about the IRC, and I'd love to go in there now and read that. If you need blocking and you can't fasten into end grain, then basically they're requiring metal fasteners. Am I missing a way to do it that wouldn't require some sort of connectors?
I mean, I can't think of a way you wouldn't be able to fasten into the end grain of the blocking, right? But you know, the joist fastening in the end grain of the joist, that does seem kind of dodgy, right, from a structural standpoint.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So have we never done a story on this?
Oh no, we have. We've done excellent stories on it.
I would think, yeah.
Yeah, and we know how to do it right. I'm curious about really what the code says. You know, they kind of, I believe they mandate a force resistance requirement, right? Your deck guardrails need to stand up to 300 pounds of lateral load or something like that.
I think it's 400.
400 pounds, yeah. But until recently, haven't told you how to do it.
So I think what the IRC people did is they watched Mike Guertin's video for Fine Homebuilding on the subject and decided to do that, right? Okay, so this comes from Chris. Patrick, I love the conversation you had with Jason Economos in 379. As an American who lived in the Antipodes, I just wanted to clear up some slang, mate. The easy one is CBD, which isn't a pot product, but the Central Business District. The other one was the concept of suburb. To anyone outside of North America, suburb means neighborhood, not necessarily a separate town or city. That concept took me a while to get my head around. This is a map of Sydney's suburbs to give you the idea. Cheers, Chris. It was great fun talking to Jason, you guys. That was super awesome. I got him up in the middle of the night to record a podcast. That was fun. Oh boy. Okay, so I told you guys ahead of the show that this is our kind of roof outsulation themed episode, and I apologize to you and to all of our listeners. We have some very long emails, but I'm just going to say that these folks know a lot more about this subject than we do, and if you really want to dig into this subject, stay tuned. If you don't, I would say save your hour and do something else. All right. Hello, Patrick and FHB crew. I have a comment and a question, both related to topics discussed recently on the podcast. First, in episode 376, you discussed sustainability concerns regarding the use of e-pay. I don't have first-hand expertise in that question, but for anyone interested in the topic, I'd recommend Shannon Rogers' podcast, Shannon's Lumber Industry Update, which can be found at lumberupdate.com. Shannon goes into sometimes excruciating detail about sustainable forest management and international regulation of the lumber trade. He makes the same point you mentioned, Patrick, about the economic interests of those who own and control tropical plantation forests. He says that there are many people who are trying to do the right thing and manage plantations sustainably, but if environmentally conscious buyers decide to boycott all tropical wood, a decision perhaps informed by an unstated assumption that forests in certain parts of the world couldn't possibly be managed responsibly, then paradoxically we end up increasing the economic pressure on plantation owners to clear-cut the land and raise cattle. So yes, diligence is required when buying tropical wood. You shouldn't buy Ipe being sold out of the back of a proverbial van, but we don't have to swear off tropical wood in the name of environmental responsibility. In fact, doing so might end up contributing to the problem rather than the solution. Okay. Now he says, I have a question related to installing foam insulation on top of roof sheathing, which you discussed most recently in episode 374. Our 1956 Cape Cod style home is ready for a new roof, and adding exterior insulation seems like a great way not only to correct the problem of our attic ductwork, but also address ice damming that happens most winters. I have two questions related to this topic. Does this approach to insulation make sense on complex roofs? Besides 3 dormers, we have valleys where the roofs of 2 different additions intersect with the original Cape footprint. Do you have any suggestions on how to talk with potential roofers about this job? Every time this topic has come up on the podcast, someone has mentioned that it's hard to find roofers willing to do this type of work. I did receive an initial yes, we can do that response the other day from a reputable roofer in our area, but I'm still trying to connect with them to talk in more detail. As I understand it, there are enough tricky details involved that I can't try to specify every detail on what would need to be done. I need to be able to rely on their expertise, but what questions can I ask upfront to determine whether this company, who I am confident are expert roofers generally, has the building expertise to successfully take on this project? I appreciate any suggestions, and thanks so much for your always interesting and informative podcast. Best regards, Brian, State College, Pennsylvania. Oh boy. You guys still with me?
Yep.
So why do we get this question all the time? Let's start with that, and then we're going to get into someone who knows more about this. Andy actually contracted someone to do this very thing, and then I'm going to read his email, but honestly, I need a break from reading because it's a lot.
What was your first question? Why do we get this question so often?
Why do we suggest this as a solution, and then why do we get this question of people having difficulty getting this done?
I think one of the reasons that it is that we're talking so much about it is because insulating and air sealing existing roofs is challenging for many reasons. One of the reasons is that roof framing, on older houses often doesn't have even if your space was unfinished, roof framing often doesn't have adequate space for adequate insulation. So the question is not, you can. If you want to bring your insulation and your thermal envelope up to the roof plane, if you have adequate space in your rafters, you can have a vented assembly with any kind of insulation you want, and you can put in a good air barrier on the inside and any appropriate vapor control, and you're good to go. But not many roofs are framed with adequate space in there for having a inch or 2 inch vent space plus the insulation you need to get to never mind like energy efficiency, but even code minimums.
Right.
So it's always, how do I get an appropriate amount of insulation into my roof? And then there's also the situation that some people may now, if their house is finished, if the roof is finished on the inside already, like a Cape, they may not want to tear the inside of their house apart. And if they're re-roofing, now they have an option.
Phenomenal disruption of your life, right? It's
absolutely.
It's your ceiling, it's your walls upstairs. It's everywhere. It's the entire home. I think we should answer the question of complex roofs greatly complicate this project.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. So
it seems like the thickness of the roof when you do the outsolation is what trips people up.
It's a huge obstacle, right? It is something you have to resolve. You can't have fascia boards that are 16 inches or even 12, 15 inches thick, right? Wide. It looks goofy.
Now add dormers to that.
Right.
And thickening the walls of those dormers, and what do the eave and rake details look like on the dormer? Is there even enough space there to add? Never mind then beefing up those trim details. So it becomes very complex on a complex roof.
I think if you have dormers, it's impossible, really. It's just like, how can you resolve all that weirdness?
Well, Martin's article on how to add roof and rigid foam insulation to your roof outside includes a photograph, and I don't know if he gets really into the weeds on it, but there's a nice detailed drawing that explains how to resolve some of those things. And then the photos that he's showing include a roof with a dormer, and there's specifically like where the dormer meets the roof sheathing. So it's not like it can't be done. I'm sure it's very complicated, but Martin writes about it.
I think one of the other things about this letter, what this letter points to, is that he I believe mentioned that he's talking to a roofing company. And so roofing companies are very good at installing roofing and very good at re-roofing. But this adding insulation, adding trim details, extending overhangs, adding sheathing, that's not roofing.
Right.
No.
That's not roofing work. And it's also not, so it's not roofing work. It's not work that many contractors are used to doing. So who knows how to do this?
Right.
Who knows how to do it well?
Well, I was wondering if he should consult with an architect and get plans. And I
think what he should do is listen to Andy, who I'm going to read next, because Andy's been through this, and he in great detail explains his trials and tribulations getting this done. And I want to thank you, Andy, for doing this, because I'm sure this took you a long time to write this, and I'm going to do my best to get through it, folks. So here we go. Dear Fine Homebuilding podcasters, in episode 374, you asked listeners to write in if they have any experience with external foam on their home. Boy, do I. Every time I hear Brian mention that you first need to find a contractor willing to install it, I want to reach out and high-five him in agreement. It was quite an undertaking to get external insulation on my house. While the installation only took about a week or two, start to finish, it took me about a year and a half to get this completed. Below is my journey. Feel free to edit this, as it may be long. P.S. I'm that weird guy that sealed his board sheathing by hand. It was mentioned on earlier podcast. I've slowed my air sealing as my caulking hand started to hurt. I'm pretty sure I sprained it. I've increased my air tightness by 15% and counting. I also get a shitty grin on my face whenever I hear my name mentioned on the podcast. My wife doesn't understand. I moved into my home in March of 2018. It's a 2-story in Norfolk, Virginia, built around 1924. When I moved in, it had an air chain of 18.6 and only about 4 inches of loose fill insulation on the attic floor. 18.6, that's mind-blowing. My first winter heat bills were $300. It had a metal roof with a 212 pitch. The square footage is about 1,114 square feet, about 557 square on each roof plane. My current roof is a metal roof that was essentially held together with paint. I was able to find an architectural drawing of the home that dated the roof to a 1967 renovation. With my $300 energy bill as motivation, it started my journey to reducing it and making my home more comfortable. Much of what I read online said to start with insulating and air sealing the top of my house. I started researching how to add insulation with shallow eaves. I submitted my idea to the GBA forum, and Martin Holliday politely told me my idea made no sense and the only way to solve it would be external insulation. I was trying to shove fluffy insulation into the eave, and there is just not enough room for much R value. I planned on replacing the roof too, so I thought, why not do it all at once? I called multiple residential roofing companies about it. A few came out and gave me quotes. Commercial roofers that put down rigid foam on industrial properties, but they were not interested in a residential job. I skipped part of that. He said, I also tried some commercial roofers, but they weren't interested in a residential job. At this point,
by the way, just to jump in there for a sec, that, by the way, is a good point that I don't think we've brought up on the show before when we talk about this, that commercial companies, may be a good place to at least ask if they'll take a residential job, because they do regularly put down rigid foam on commercial jobs on flat and low-pitched roofs. So it's different, but at least they've...
And they're, commercial roofers are trained, right? So you're not going to, it's unlikely you're going to have complete hacks. They might say that we can't do this, but they're not going to hack it up, hopefully.
Right.
Okay, at this point, I was stuck. I reached out to the closest professional I could find, a company called Think Little. It's owned by John Semmelhack, who's a passive house consultant. One of his project managers, Benjamin Knopp, helped me create a plan on how to reduce my energy use while getting the most bang for the buck. Instead of new windows, he suggested a heat pump water heater, for example. They also helped me create a design for the roof with some rigid insulation on top and some fluffy insulation in the rafters. I had Benjamin Knopp reach out to roofers. I found that roofing companies are more likely to have a conversation with a professional building consultant than a homeowner who reads a lot of GBA. We were really able to only find 2 companies willing to do the work. One was a high-end passive house builder. Unfortunately, his business was from out of town, so the cost to have his company do it included transportation and housing of the workers. Benjamin found a local company that did residential and commercial roofing and was experienced with foam on the commercial side. As far as I know, I may be the only residential job they've done with rigid foam. It took a lot of back and forth with Benjamin and the roofing company to get them to agree to the job. I went with the local roofing company rather than the passive builder. I'm sure it's not passive standards, but the roof works pretty good. My attic at one point it got up to 120 degrees. Now it tops out at about 84. I think a lot of the current heat comes from the dehumidifier I have up there. Please see attached pics before and after. And I'll put those on the podcast page for those of you who are still with us. I can see why most people would not pursue rigid insulation. I essentially had to harass roofing companies, and when that failed, I had to hire a professional to then harass roofing companies into building the roof that I wanted. A normal person would have just given up and done whatever the roofer or insulator suggested. I should also note I had 3 different insulation companies come out. All of them just wanted to shove insulation in the attic. Reading what I have on how heat, or rather energy, flows towards the path of least resistance, the lack of insulation in the eaves would have really lowered my overall performance. While one company did suggest sealing the attic deck, that would have been near impossible due to the makeup of the deck floor. Some drywall, some lath and plaster areas have both. I don't even know how many hours I've invested sealing the gable ends of my home, so my attic is now encapsulated. Much of it on my stomach, trying to tell myself to stay calm as I wedge myself in the small corner of my home. To pay someone to do this work and to do it correctly would be very expensive. Costs are below. The install was in September of 2019. Andy in Norfolk. Okay, so he has a summary. High-end version, $25,000 to have the passive house home builder insulate the exterior of the roof deck and prep the roof deck. Plus $10,000 to $12,000 for a roof to put on new standing seam roof. This version would be 100% bright and airtight. The less cost option was $22,800 to have the local roofing company follow the Think Little Consulting's plan. This version is pretty good. They did all the steps, but I'm not sure every seam is taped or caulked 100%. So that's a pretty significant savings, right?
I was going to say the opposite. I didn't think it was. I would have thought it would have been more savings.
Well, I think that second price, it looks like it includes the roofing.
Yeah, it's everything. Soup to nuts.
So it's.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
As much as $14,000 or $15,000 less.
Yeah. Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Andy, thank you for that. I appreciate your experience. That was great.
It's a little discouraging for people who are wanting to do this, though.
You think? I like how he says a normal person would have just given up.
I've heard homeowners say that it's hard to find somebody, but I had no idea that it was
Did you guys
hard.
see the pictures of Andy in the podcast assets folder with Andy jammed into the eave of his attic?
Yes.
That guy.
Kudos to him.
Love this guy.
Man. He really committed.
He's nuts. Hi, Patrick. Thanks for your excellent article on home generators. I have a question that I haven't been able to get an answer to from my local electrician or the business that supplied my generator, and was hoping you might have some insight or know someone who might be able to take a crack at it. I have a house on Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire. The house is super insulated and heated for year-round use. I have electricity to it and a Kohler propane whole house generator with an auto transfer switch and their on-cue product, so I can remotely monitor whether we're on utility or generator power. Living on an island, we are prioritized at the end of the outage list, understandably. When we do lose power in winter, it can be a week or longer before it is restored. Unfortunately, the position of the house makes it less than desirable for any solar applications. My question is this: during the winter, I really only need the generator to come on a few times a day to run the heating system, refrigerator, etc. Running it 24/7 depletes my propane supply pretty rapidly, although I do have 2 1,000 tanks. I've been contemplating a system that would incorporate a Tesla or equivalent power wall and calculating how long a battery or batteries would power a low-draw house. However, What would be ideal is when the battery runs down that the generator would kick in and recharge it and then shut down again. Or without a battery, get the generator to kick on every 6 to 8 hours for an hour. I do have a uninterrupted power supply backup, so I have remote connectivity to my home network for a day after the power goes out, even if the generator is off. I keep thinking I can't be the only one who would like to do this. I've written to Kohler and received no response. I'm assuming it goes into some general mailbox and never gets to someone that could answer this. Any help, suggestions, etc. would be much appreciated. Thank you. Well.
Did you find this product?
So yes, Kylie, when I was researching this topic for this feature that someone asked about, Generac was in the process of developing their power cell, which was not yet on the market, and is exactly what this person describes it, which is a huge battery that works in conjunction with your generator. So when you have low loads, it relies on the battery, so you're not using all this propane to run a generator that's really completely oversized for what you need it for. So this thing is now on the market, and I don't know a lot about it except that if you're interested, and I'm sure you're right, that there are a lot of people who want this, especially folks in California who have these roving blackouts. And they're selling a lot of these, as I understand it, in California, along with standby generators.
Yeah, and I believe it can be incorporated with the PV system as well, so that the batteries can be charged first and foremost by PV, by renewable energy, and then if you have an outage or if your batteries aren't keeping up with, if the PV generation isn't keeping up with keeping the batteries charged, then the generator kicks on as sort of second option. So that would seem like a pretty slick system. I mean, that would pretty much guarantee you're not going to go without power. And putting renewable energy first.
Did anybody call to get a quote? I was looking for a price.
So I'm pretty sure these things alone, and you need some controls too to do all this stuff, right? I'm pretty sure that the battery itself is thousands. How
much is a power wall? It's probably along those lines. I feel like it's like 7,000.
I don't run in those circles, Kylie. I don't know about you.
I feel like I did look that up at one point. It's up there.
It's a point that I made in the feature that, these generators, they suck a ton of gas. Holy cow. It's like 2 to 4 gallons per hour. And, if the thing's running 24/7, it doesn't take long to suck up 1,000 gallons of propane.
Right.
Right, Jeff?
I'm sure, yeah. I'm wondering about talking to home automation integrators, whether they would be able to come up with some sort of control system.
Oh, I'm sure they could.
Yeah.
I think that's a very good suggestion.
Well, I mean, this unit probably comes with installation instructions that would include controls,
I think this is only
right?
installed by Generac dealers. This is a very special thing. I'm curious how they move it around. It's got to weigh 1,000 pounds, at least hundreds.
But what I'm saying is the installation must include, whoever does it, must include controls, right?
Oh, yeah, sure.
So you're saying how to make it home automated so he can remote control it from elsewhere? Is that what you're thinking?
I'm saying so it knows to power your house and what to power and, when it's called upon to do its job.
Integrate it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry. This is from Rick. I've listened to your podcast starting on episode 20 or so and have not missed one. Keep it witty at least half the time. I don't know if you missed a word there. As a relatively new custom builder, most clients I work with start with portions of a plan. Currently, I develop a 2D plan going back and forth with a client, getting to know them, and then a designer takes over for the rest of the work, usually redrawing my work at a pretty high price. I'm considering taking the plunge to get a more BIM-y type of tool, such as Chief, Architect, SoftPlan, or maybe Vectorworks. But then I'd have to buy an Audi or something. They all cost about the same, and I'll make similar claims. I'm simply not big enough to pay AutoCAD/Revit rates, and now I don't rent everyday tools, so I'm not renting software either. I've been unable to find a comparison between these programs from a believable third party within the past 15 years. Why select one over the other? What are their relative strengths and weaknesses? According to their videos, they're all amazing. Seems like reality is not so rosy. Where are the thorns? Seems like other smaller custom builders would like to know as well. Keep your attic sealed, Rick. Rick says, I currently use QCAD for Linux, which is 50 euros for a perpetual license. It does 2D CAD just fine, but every single line must be drawn or copied. There are no macro functions to draw a wall or such. It works fine to refine a plan, but drawing an elevation takes too much time, and customers want to see the dollhouse view. The videos online for all three of the simpler 3D home CAD tools make it look really easy, but it's really hard to know where the annoyances lie. I want to hear from a builder with a modest level of computer savvy who gave it a shot for a year. How steep is the learning curve? How exotic can the house get? Do they tie you to the monthly subscriptions to keep it running? If I need to not pay the renewal for 6 months in the next downturn, am I allowed back in? These are all great questions, Rick, and I have no answers. Do you guys know anything about these programs?
We did a building science show with Steve Basic, Armando Cobo, and Barry Price. And I know all three of them are architects, not builders, which is who this guy wanted to speak with. But at the same time, they use some of these. I remember Barry specifically talking about Vectorworks software, and he explains how he uses it, what he's able to do with it, what he's developed this whole detail library with summary sheets of assemblies that he uses regularly. But Steve walks through the software that he uses. I can't remember. It might have been CAD. But anyway, it's a good show because the theme of it is communicating high performance details. And they do talk about the software they use. So it's worth listening to just to get a feel for their thoughts.
I think that's a great suggestion. Brian, what do you know about these programs?
I know very little. You know, I remember a while back we wanted to try to do a review, sort of a test of design software, and we didn't find a way to do it because everyone that we spoke with just knew what they use.
Right.
And everyone else is crazy, right?
It's hard. It's just hard to find a professional that uses them all or has the time and willingness to try them all. And I don't know how much. I don't know how valuable a review is going to be of someone who tries it out for a project or a sample project. You know, it's something that I think you know, as we all know with any software that we use, right? The more you use it, the more comfortable you get with it, and the more you end up liking it. And so that's been the challenge. Only thing I can say is that because I don't use any of them, I have graph paper, but I can say that I'm always pretty impressed by the demos of Chief Architect that I've seen. And I've seen a lot of them at the Builder Show. And whenever I've had questions, they've had answers right away. Oh, here's how you do that. And of course we can do that. So, you know, I've no experience with it, but I would definitely, if you were looking, I would definitely, based on those demos, and I've sat through a bunch of them because they do such a nice job with the demos at trade shows, that I would at least consider taking a deep dive into Chief Architect as one of the options. You know, they're one of our advertisers. I want to point that out, and I'm sure there's you know, because I'm, you know, promoting them, I want to make that very clear that they are an advertiser of ours, and I'm sure there's other programs that are great too. That's just the one that I've over and over and over again been able to watch demos because it's sort of their shtick at the trade shows. So,
for what it's worth, and I'm going to ask our listeners because obviously, as our foam outsulation discussion has indicated, they know a lot more than us. So I'm going to ask their help with this question too.
It seems like most builders use SketchUp.
A lot of people do.
Yeah.
Well, and a lot of people use SketchUp as a quick tool for visualization. You know, like architects that use AutoCAD for their construction drawings. You know, still often use SketchUp for like the tool that they, you know, create a quick 3D model to show their clients.
Right.
And so it seems to be sort of a kind of a tandem product.
I can say that, not knowing anything about this, I think it would have to be a 3D product for people to understand what you're trying to present to them. Like, people don't get 2D plans, in my experience. That's not what most people can understand.
I will say that I remember Barry saying that Vectorworks does both 2D and 3D renderings. I remember him saying that.
Well, I was worried we weren't going to have enough foam insulation content, so I got another question here about the same subject. So we're just going to get this out of our system, and then we're going to ask folks for some other kind of question. Hi, FHB podcaster. Did I hear someone ask for more listener questions? Well, I'm a listener. I have questions, so happy to oblige. It's a win-win. My question today is roofs, insulation, and air sealing naturally. Apologies if there's too much information here. We own a 1950 1.5-story cape in eastern Massachusetts. We're planning on getting solar panels installed and need a new roof anyways. So what great timing. I'm trying to get it more efficient and address the oven-like temperatures in the attic during the summer, but not break the bank and not rip up the entire house. It's one of those super simple deals. It has an 8/12 pitch on the front, so there's no dormers, and a 3.5/12 full dormer pitch on the back. There's no hips, no valleys. The second story is just like the one shown in this nifty folk art taken from this GBA article. The second story sheetrock under the ceiling is about 7 foot. The top attic is only tall enough for hands and knees along a ductboard that runs the length of the house. And watch your head on the roofing nails. It has 2x6 rafters and ceiling joists spaced at uneven intervals naturally. There's no HVAC up in the attic, just mice. The house has an oil furnace, soon to be replaced with an added heat pump. When we bought the house, I insulated with the pink stuff, fancy high-efficiency R21 that fits in the 2x6 joist bays. I put soffit vents in the overhang in front, made a continuous soffit vent in the rear, and there's no overhang, so I put 1-inch spacers behind the fascia and added a ridge vent. I slid in vent chutes and bats while I had the fascia off, and using my patent-pending Masonite and document clips strategy, so the insulation is the enclosed joist bays along the roof line for each outer third of the roof and along the top attic floor for the inner top third. The top attic is outside the envelope. The attic already had gable vents on both ends. I even went against the common wisdom and insulated along the roof line behind the knee wall, not the knee wall itself. And now I see that this seems to be the GBA recommendation. So he's saying he followed the roof line with the insulation instead of insulating the knee wall, which is the mistake that everybody makes. Now,
because they're trying to leave that space outside.
Well, I don't think they
envelope.
Understand that that's way harder to air seal and insulate, right? Yeah. Now the winter on the snow roof. Now in winter, the snow on the roof does not immediately melt. I see ghosts of the rafters due to thermal bridging, as I've learned from the podcast, but icicles and ice dams are pretty minor. Yay for me. I have some air sealing, caulking to do on the attic floor, but mostly I think it's pretty good. But here's the thing. In the summer, it's like an oven up there to the point where the house just stays hot all night. The wife is not happy, so I'm not happy. I've been doing my reading on FHB and GBA, and while I've learned a lot, I'm no longer even sure what problem I am trying to solve. Conduction, convection, radiation, thermal mass. I mean hot, but what's the root cause? I'm going to contact a roofer and local green insulation company, but wanted to get your advice first. I've thought about various things. 1, a whole house fan. No need to read up some more. I need to read up some more on these. But anyways, the heat pump will likely be an AC unit as well. So probably a fan would be superfluous. But if we have AC, I want to solve the high heat first and save on electricity during the first 2 or 3 weeks of the summer. Okay, so don't do that. Whole house fans are a problem, right? They make your appliances backdraft. They depressurize your house. They suck out your conditioned air. So don't do that. Reflective shingles, the existing ones are medium gray, 3 tabs from like 1980. What are the reflective ones that are so much more expensive? Never mind, I know. So high emissivity roofs and shingles can be one of those materials, do save energy, and it's probably a good idea to do that. And they don't cost that much more, right, Brian?
I'm not sure about the cost difference, but I don't think so.
I don't think it's much difference.
Yeah, I mean, they're actually, because they're actually less common, less desirable roofs, because most people don't want light colored roofs.
Why is that?
Yeah, why is that?
I'm not sure. I mean,
Yeah, they're just not
aesthetics, I guess.
traditional.
Oh,
Yeah.
they-
Yeah,
mean,
they're just
get-
not traditional.
They're more prone to algae and black staining,
Absolutely.
right? Yeah.
Oh, is that
Or-
right?
Well, at least, and if not more prone, you're going to see it more.
Yeah.
Right, right.
That's what I mean, I guess. It's
That
not
makes
more
sense.
prone, it's just more visible.
It's just more visible,
Right.
yeah.
He asked, should I install a radiant barrier? But there seems to be some controversy. Patrick, you talked to a fellow at length about radiant barriers not too long ago. He seemed very sure of their value, but I don't know if I have the right kind of roof. And I see all kinds of articles throwing shade on radiant barriers. So he's talking about Peter Pfeiffer, right, who is a huge fan. Peter also lives in Austin, Texas,
Right.
and you're in eastern Massachusetts, so I don't think that's the same thing. I would say spend your money on insulation, not radiant barriers, is the conventional wisdom. What about closed cell roof? What about closed cell foam under the roof sheathing? The whole way, removing the gable vents to bring the top attic into the envelope. With the enclosed joist space, I'm not sure if this is even possible without ripping out the ceilings, which is definitely not in the plan. Maybe remove the sheathing. That's doable, I guess, but I have to talk to the roofing and insulation folks. My main concern is if the top attic is hot now, what will it be like when it has no venting? Even hotter? Yikes. Okay. What do you think about this plan? It's definitely less destructive, right, than some other things, but if you have to rip off the roof sheathing,
It doesn't
that
sound
seems
less-
like a no-go
yeah.
to me.
That seems like a lot of work. I think the answer is exterior rigid foam.
So we finally have come around to the whole theme of the episode here. What about rigid foam on the outside and seal the top attic? But I won't need like 6 or 8 inches of that to meet code. Well, yes, you will. Is that a thing? Will my roof line look like some kind of stupid thing with 16-inch tall fascias and rakes? So this is one of the problems we've talked about earlier. Maybe some weighted average of options 2, 3, and 4, and 5. So I don't think you need any of these things, Peter. You have a pretty good roof. You say you don't have big ice dams. It's like not a problem in the winter. You do see thermal bridging, but so does everybody has thermal bridging on their roofs except for really high performance homes, right? Especially with a cape, because the second story, the roof is your living space. So you have the roof right there, right on top of the conditioned space. There's no attic that's unconditioned, right? So your thermal bridging is going to show up. You need a freaking air conditioner. You need some cooling upstairs. It seems really easy to me. And if you could do a mini split, that'd be great. If you could do 2 mini split heads, that's less great.
I'm with Patrick.
Yeah.
You need some cooling. Second floor living space and capes are hot.
And keep in mind that a window air conditioner can be a perfectly efficient and cost-effective way to go.
Think about how many window air conditioners and electricity to power them you could buy for the $22,000 that our previous podcast listener wrote in with the cost of their roof outsulation retrofit, right?
But
Yeah.
the thing is, he's going to his plan is to replace the roof anyway. He says it needs replacing. So if he's
Right, but
going to replace
a roof replacement can cost tens of thousands of dollars less than the work that he's
I see what you're saying.
Considering.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say if you really want to do this, Peter, the right way is to get an energy audit and have someone who knows what they're doing, a HERS rater, for example, tell you what to do. Do some, you get what's going on. You might have some thermal bypasses or whatever that might help a lot. And, capes are hard to cool, right? Because you don't have a lot of space for ductwork, and you certainly don't want to put it in the unconditioned part of the attic, but you have these knee walls and you brought your insulation layer down the roof. So, it's a perfect place to put an air handler and ductwork if you can squeeze it in there.
How feasible is that? Do people put them there very often?
I think
Put
so.
equipment in those little spaces?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. That's feasible. I mean, it like Patrick mentioned before, it might not be necessary if you can use a ductless unit, and if there's a good place to have the interior wall hung, part of the mini split, you might not have to run any ductwork, but those attic spaces do give you a good option if there's ductwork in the house and you just have to get it up there and then you can run it through that space. That can be a good way to go. And like I said, or a window mounted air conditioner.
Right.
Just cool the place down and be happy for the summer.
If you're gonna, put a new heat pump in anyway, and I don't know whether he was talking about a central unit or mini splits or a ducted mini split, what have you, but your heating and cooling contractor needs to know that your upstairs is uncomfortable, and you need to talk to them about solutions for getting some cool air up there, because just swapping the central equipment is unlikely to help. Although, if you have cooling downstairs, it's going to help a little bit. But it's hot upstairs when you don't have any cold air going up there.
I wonder if he could get away with one head if he does ductless for the whole house with a cape.
I think it depends on if you have, other family members and you need, to have doors closed, right? That's the issue.
That's true.
If you're willing to leave doors
yeah.
open, it's
right.
a lot easier to have one head than if you have to have the bedrooms sealed up and isolated from each other.
That's the difference. Mm-hmm.
I find it interesting, even in the very, very low-load homes we talk about on GBA, for example, the one ducted mini split doesn't work, and even in these very well insulated airtight homes that you just need to have two. One does the cooling upstairs in the summertime, and then in the heating season you use the lower the unit on the lower floor.
Yeah, we had published an article on GBA about a house in Northern California. I think it was called A Pretty Good House in the Sierra Nevadas. Oh, yeah. And that was some of the feedback that he gave us. Very low load house in a very moderate climate. Mm-hmm. And because of the way, because the lower floor was so wide open, I think that his loads would have allowed him to get away with one mini split head. But the upstairs, the way, now we have bedrooms and smaller spaces, it just didn't take care of the cooling up there. Mm-hmm. And that was some of the feedback that he gave us.
It just occurred to me, like a ducted mini split that runs through the knee wall space in the upstairs is a great solution for a cape, right? Mm-hmm. You have low static losses, so they're very efficient, and they have super modulating compressors. They're the high-tech solution if you can afford it.
Yeah.
Let's do a wrap up talking about our thoughts of exterior insulation. I'm kidding.
I think we've had enough of the subject for today. It's so funny. I was telling Patrick, Brian, when I opened up GBA's Q&A forum this morning, the first 3 questions were about exterior roof insulation. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, it's like, insulating roofs are hands down the most common question on GBA for over a decade. Mm-hmm. That, no doubt about it. And it's for the reasons that we brought up at the beginning of this. And also, what we know more and more is that exterior insulation for all assemblies makes the most sense. That's why Joe Stiebrick calls it the perfect wall. And why he then says, and by the way, it's not limited to walls. Your roof is just a wall on a diagonal, and your slab is just a wall on the flat. And it always makes sense. It always makes the most sense to have the building assembly inside the thermal boundary, all the control layers, really. That's the point of the perfect wall. It doesn't make it easy, and it doesn't make it appropriate for all situations. Mm-hmm. And that's why, despite that term, and despite Joe promoting it, it's not happening a lot.
I'm glad you added that caveat, because it's complicating, right? It is, yes. And that's why no one wants to do it. Roofers, contractors, it's a hassle. And
it's not the way we're building right now. So it's not the way we know how to build right now. And, maybe we get there someday, or maybe not. Maybe some other solutions, kind of are kind of, arise.
Do you guys know builders who do this regularly?
Could become more common.
Does Mike Guertin
What's
do
that?
This?
Yeah.
Does Mike
I don't know about rooftop.
Yeah, he has. And he actually...
What? Did we lose you?
He's done this. He's written in about his experience, and
Oh yeah, did he write?
I think anyone who's done it would say it's harder than just putting, you know, siding on sheathing, right? And building the way everyone does.
You know, the folks at Zero Energy Designs, I think it's pretty much their common detail is all exterior insulation. So, you know, it'd be interesting to maybe hear from some of the builders that they've worked with, to, you know, and I know they're an architecture firm, so it might not be that they're working with the same builders enough for the builders to have, you know, multiple jobs that they've done, but maybe we can reach out to some of their builders and just sort of see like what's the learning curve, how have you improved the process. It'd be good to know. We do have an energy retrofit story coming up next year from a really smart builder in the Pacific Northwest, and that's going to get into some of the details of exterior insulation. So hopefully we'll get down to some of the nitty gritty and that company's learning curve in that article.
I can't wait to talk more about it.
I'm going to reach out to Zero Energy Design and see if we might connect with some of those builders that they've worked with.
Yeah.
What do folks say on GBA when this question is broached, Kiley?
I don't know if I can answer that in a nutshell, because it seems like everybody has varying opinions.
And it's always the caveats, right? Like, how complicated is the roof? Can you find someone who's going to do it? Like, what does it cost, right?
Yeah. And how much do I really need? How much can I get away from?
There's no doubt. Yeah, there's no doubt it's a viable approach. There's no doubt it's a good approach. You know, that's not the question, I don't think. I don't think anyone's questioning whether it makes sense or it's okay, or, you know, you have to understand the vapor profile of your roof. You have to understand air sealing. There's some things you need to know before you go ahead and do it. But with those, if you understand the assemblies and how they work, it's a great assembly. The caveats are all in cost and complication and execution.
I think we've belabored that point.
But we keep getting questions. So maybe we're not belaboring it.
I think this morning.
Maybe we're not belaboring it clearly enough.
It's great. I love our listeners. They are awesome. I appreciate you all writing in with your questions. We did get a bump in the number, and I appreciate everyone's feedback on the things we ask about. It is super helpful for the folks who need real world experience, which we often have little of. Right? Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks to Kiley, Brian, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Happy building, and thanks very much for listening.